Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview Sam Glover, clinical fellow at Suffolk Law's Legal Innovation Technology Lab and co-founder of Lawyerist, whose journey from solo practitioner to builder of digital infrastructure has created free, open-source tools that help thousands navigate the court system and access justice. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host, and I am thrilled today to have Sam Glover on. He is a clinical fellow at the LIT Lab, the Legal Innovation Technology Lab at Suffolk Law, but he has a wonderful career, including Lawyerist, and a lot more that we're going to get into today. Well, Sam, I just want to welcome you to the podcast. I also want to take note that you just got back from a little relaxing time, right?
Yeah. For those watching on the video, this is where I spent a few days over the last week.
That's so amazing. And you were sharing with me, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but that you were out there for about a week and that you didn't have data, you didn't have cell service, you just were, doing it without.
The Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness in northern Minnesota is pretty remote, and there's nothing. I had books and a friend and a place to swim. That was about it.
Wow. Really, really old school, taking a step back in time. Did it feel weird?
No. I think I may have mentioned before we started recording, but as somebody who I like being connected, I like full of ideas, lots of stuff to do. It is hard for me to put the phone down if I can pick it up again. But when you walk into a wilderness area where the nearest cell phone tower is way too far away, like there's literally no signal, that is freeing, because then there's nothing to do except just relax. And we did nothing for 6 days, nothing much. We hung around, took naps, built a fire, drank some whiskey and wine, went skinny dipping. It was fantastic. I mean, I find it so hard to just do nothing when I have access to all the technology. So turning it off for a while was really refreshing. So
I'm just curious, did it take you a full day to kind of decompress and just get into the mental frame of mind that this is the new normal, not being connected? How long did it take to?
I think I'm pretty quick on stuff like that. And some folks know that I used to do a lot of winter camping. I've kind of haven't done as much lately, but in the same area, like on a lake like this, but frozen. And there, I think that the transition is pretty stark. When you go and walk your dog in the cold, you bring a different mindset and maybe different gear than you would if you were going to spend the next 3 days in the woods in the winter. And so when you close your door and walk away from your car when you know you're going to be away in the woods for 3 hours or 3 days, you're not as cold as you would be when you walk your dog in the same clothing. And because I think closing the door and walking away from the car is enough of a transition when it's a drastic change like that. And I found the same for this. Close the door, walk away from the car with the canoe on your head, and yeah, I'm kind of in it from that moment on.
Mindset is everything, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, Sam, I'm thrilled to have you on the show, just to have an excuse to talk with you and catch up a little bit. Because, as I pointed out before we started recording, that I did interview you once before for a podcast that at the time I had with GLSA, and that was 8 years ago.
Yeah, you can't believe it was 8 years ago. It doesn't feel like it, but hey, I guess we're the granddads of legal tech at this point. So.
Well, I love the beard that you've grown out. It's perfectly suited for going into the wilderness like that.
Yeah, for sure.
without like going into a lot of depth, because I do want to go backwards before I go forwards. But right now, you're a clinical fellow at Suffolk. What does that entail?
Yeah, it's a really descriptive title, isn't it? Um, and bureaucratically, there are essentially two titles you can have. So everybody who's not clinical faculty in the clinics program is your clinical fellow or your clinical faculty, I think. Um, my job is I joined Suffolk at David Colarusso and then Quentin Stainhouse, Bryce Willie, who are all there with me during the pandemic, started what became the Document Assembly Line Project, which was a way of trying to figure out how to help people get stuff done in the court system when nobody could leave their houses, including many of the judges and court clerks and staff. And so what they were doing is building online guided interviews to help people complete and file court forms and other documents. And it very quickly grew into like an international effort. They had hundreds of volunteers from different countries. And the assembly line metaphor was each person can do a little bit of things to move the work forwards. It's changed a little bit. Now it's less of an assembly line, more of a bunch of experts working on guided interviews, but that's still fundamentally what it is. And I was brought on board to scale it, to say we've had some success. They've proved the concept, and now they actually want to make this a sustainable, ongoing thing that courts, legal aid organizations can rely on. And so that's been my job, to organize the project, to help document things, to build procedures, to do outreach to courts and legal aid organizations, to figure out what our contracts look like and what our offerings are, apply for grants, all this stuff. That's what my clinical fellow job description is, but Bryce's is different.
It's curious. Like, are you finding that not all courts are the same? There's some that are more open to it than others, and there's resistance with some courts. And
I love learning how things work, and I like learning how businesses and bureaucracies and things work. And so for me, it's been really fun to like learn the inside baseball of court procurement and IT and stuff like that. And yeah, lots of courts are different.
well, that sounds like really good work. And I've always seen you, Sam, as one of the do-gooders. And so
I see myself that way. So I'm glad it reflects out.
well, definitely. And for you to be able to project that and to, make it like realize it in the real world through your work at Suffolk is, that's fantastic.
Yeah, thanks. I really like what I do.
And to that point about where you're at now, I as the audience knows, want to go back in time to the beginning and get into your origin story a little bit. You currently, like right now, you're in Minneapolis, where it's kind of you're suffering through a heat wave right now, right?
Yeah, it's like it's only 88 or something right now, but yeah.
Were you born there? Did you grow up in Minneapolis?
I was born in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, which is the first suburb to the west of Minneapolis. And then my dad was in the State Department. So I was here until second grade, and then I finished second grade in Virginia. And then by third grade, I was in Santo Domingo. And for third, fourth, fifth grade, I was in Santo Domingo and Panama.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, State Department, right?
Yeah, my dad was State Department.
Okay, let's get into that a little bit. So, what the kinds of work that your mom and dad did, and where you were living, and also like how big your family, like how many brothers and sisters and stuff.
I have a younger brother and a younger sister. My sister's a year and a half younger than me. We went to the same law school, but she's up in Alaska. She's a do-gooder up in Alaska. She's works for Earth Justice. So, trying to stop bridges to nowhere and highways to nowhere and logging rights and things like that. She does great work. And then my sister's a character. They sailed around the world for like 3 years. She and her partner. He's great too. They're super interesting people. And then I have a little brother who's 9.5 years younger than me, and he works for the government in DC, and he's sort of I think what he's doing is basically software testing, quality assurance work.
Interesting family, and I like to hear that your sister is also, kind of on the pro justice, pro good, doing good side.
Yeah.
And just a little background on your parents.
My dad lives here in Minneapolis. As I said, he was State Department, and he finished his career in Afghanistan, and then New Zealand was his final posting. But then he moved back here a few years back, and my mom lives out in Virginia, so Northern Virginia, which everybody just wants to call it the DC suburbs. It's not, I don't like that, but that's what people call it. So she lives out there with her two collies.
There was a bit of moving around when you were a kid. Like, you said Santo Domingo?
I lived in Santo Domingo for about a year and a half, I think. And then in Panama for, I think, about 2 years. We left because the U.S. was invading to oust Noriega. And so we ended up getting evacuated along with the rest of the U.S. citizens working for the government. So, I mean, there's a few wild anecdotes there too, because it was crazy. But
Sure. Like, what's going on? But
well, so like in the lead up to that, the people in Panama City were rioting, and we lived in the city, and we lived in an apartment building, and I remember we had some friends who lived down the street, and we would go up on the roof of their apartment and like watch the riots below us. And these were pretty hardcore, like they're throwing fire Molotov cocktails at the cops who were firing rubber bullets back and knocking people out. And it was pretty nuts. There lots of tear gas. And so like we'd be up on the roof and the tear gas clouds would just waft up to us.
Wow.
Feels like inhaling hot sand when you're 20 stories up. I imagine when you're on the ground, it's much worse. And then that building that we were watching from at our friend's house, Noriega's girlfriend actually lived there, and everybody knew that. And that's why there were so many riots in our neighborhood. But before all this busted loose, so we were sitting out front playing on our bikes, and a limo pulled up, and Noriega, who we all knew was cara de piña, pineapple face, hops out of the car and looks at us and grunts and goes in to visit with his girlfriend, and his chauffeur hung out with us and fixed my bike. So it was wild.
That is wild. How old were you at the time?
I guess that was like first or second grade, and my mom was so determined. She was like, "You guys are going to school," and so she would in our Toyota minivan, the original Toyota minivan, she would just drive us straight through riots. Like we would be driving through people pounding on the windows because my mom thought we needed to go to school that day. Nobody was going to tell her that her kids were going to stay home, and we had diplomatic plates, so they all knew who we were. And so people were banging on the windows to try to get our attention, and she would just slowly crawl through the crowds because, damn it, her kids were going to school.
Wow, determined mom.
Yeah, nobody tells my mom not to do something.
For you as a kid, like, that is definitely like not. It's a very interesting like experience to grow up like that and to see different parts of the world and to have that kind of exposure to the way different places work and like the kind of relationship that people have with their government. What was that like for you to take that in at that age?
I don't really know. Because like I was young enough that I think fifth grade was when the first year I started back in Virginia. So this was between second, third, fourth grade. We were in Santo Domingo and Panama. I guess what I think it does, and like what I've tried to do, what I've hoped that I've begun instilling in my kids is just, I think when you spend time in other countries, especially long enough, living there, people stop becoming strangers. And I guess I've always thought that was really important. Like I want my kids to not be afraid of the world. I hate when it drives me crazy seeing people who just are afraid of difference. And I think the more time you spend around different people, the less weird and threatening difference feels. I mean, I think we're humans. Our brains are programmed to discriminate and friend from foe and things like that. And if you're too sheltered, all you see is foes because all you see is strangers. And not everybody's programmed that way, but I think it's easier to do that. And it's a lot harder if you spend a lot of time in unfamiliar scenarios. And I think I grew up just assuming that things were weird sometimes and that was okay. And like you can be comfortable you learn very quickly to be comfortable in uncomfortable places, hence going to the woods, right? Like that was a really comfortable week for me. And I know that lots of people would be really focused on bugs and heat and sweat. And I think the more you get out and the more you experience, and younger is better, the harder it is to look at other people and see strangers that you don't care about. So
That's a great way to look at the world and a great lesson to get from that. I truly, believe that myself and agree with you that the less that we can see different people as others and see them more as just an extended we, the better off we'll all be. So then you come back, you're in Virginia at fifth grade?
somewhere in there, my parents split up and my dad continued traveling
Okay.
with the State Department, and my mom decided to stay put in Virginia. So I lived in Virginia from fifth grade through college. I went to school in Northern Virginia for high school, and then I went to Virginia Tech for college, and then I came out to Minnesota for law school.
So in Virginia, like, and maybe this hadn't happened in Virginia or elsewhere, but did you have any early exposure to computers that kind of got you hooked, or that wasn't a factor for you?
I didn't have super early exposure because we didn't have. Once my parents split up, my mom was starting her career from scratch, so we didn't have a whole lot of money. But she brought home. Well, I think our first computer was a hand-me-down from the neighbor who was upgrading to like I don't know. They were with like a 286. They were probably upgrading from a 186, which is going to be nothing to most listeners. But so I think I got my hands on WordStar, and stuff like that. And then she brought home one from work that had Windows 3.11 on it. I broke that thing constantly. I was on that thing nonstop, and AOL and CompuServe and whatever. And I don't know. And so I learned a lot from fixing it. And I guess I'm just fascinated by taking things apart and putting things back together. It drove my mom crazy. Every toy she got me, I'd take apart. Sometimes I'd get them back together and sometimes not. But computers are just a box of mysteries to take apart and put back together. And so I guess I've just always been fascinated by them as a place to make things and learn things and do things and connect with people. And so I don't know when I built my first website, but I definitely was building my own websites in college just for fun. And I built a website for a European Star Wars convention, and for a friend's startup video game. I guess we would call it a blog or something now, but I think they offered me equity, and I was too dumb to take it, and I really should have. I think they had a IPO later on that made my eyes water. So I don't even remember the name, Aztec Gold or something like that, maybe.
Well, you live, you learn. But yeah, that when you went to Virginia Tech, I mean, that was during the rise of the net. Before
we were the most connected campus in the country. That was their big claim to fame.
Really?
Which meant that we all had 192 baud modems, kilobaud modems, I think. Whatever that, 192 something. It was slow as hell. But they were all plugged into our campus phones. We all had digital phones in our dorm rooms. And so you could start your MP3 and then go to lunch, and it'd probably be done downloading one song by the time you got back from lunch on Napster. So
not bad.
Nope, not bad. I had dozens of songs by the end of the first month. And it was a dorm full of nerds, so we actually were stringing Cat5 cable down the hallway so that we'd play Command and Conquer and Quake and Duke Nukem in multiplayer in the dorms. So I went to school with some friends from high school and his friends I met, and so I think there were like 8 of us. We cobbled together our money to buy a router, and I think Mike had that in his room, and then we strung Cat5 cable. We all split the cost of Cat5 cable so we could run it up and down the hallway, and it was just duct taped to the walls, but we had our own local network so that we could play video games together.
That's pretty cool. Like, did you know from a younger age that you wanted to go like to to university that had a tech focus, or like how did you?
No, I was an English major, man. I had my heart set on Notre Dame for whatever, because I visited. My cousin was the leprechaun there, and I visited, and I got to see a Boston College or Boston University basketball game, and had the greatest weekend of my life as a junior in high school. And my grades weren't good enough, so I didn't get in there. And by the time that early admission or whatever period was done, my choices were down to Virginia Tech and Clemson University, and I was a pole vaulter as well, and I really liked the coach at Clemson, but Virginia Tech was a lot cheaper and closer to home, and I figured I could always transfer. But I loved it. I ended up loving the school and the weird English department in a tech focused school, and I loved being in the mountains and whitewater kayaking on the weekends. Well, all the time. It was great. So I to being going to a tech focused school had almost nothing to do with it. It was more that my friends were going there and it was affordable. Um, and then I didn't know if I was going to be there for a year or four, and I ended up falling in love, so I stayed.
That's awesome. Like it also makes me think of my younger daughter who just graduated from high school.
Hmm.
She's making the choice of the university to go to because her friends are going. You
Yeah,
know, um, which thankfully it's close to home too, so she's not going to.
yeah.
Um,
Hey, I mean, I can't complain. It worked out for me. So,
so I've majored in English at Virginia Tech.
hmm I thought I was going to be a double major in computer science, and I am. I mean, it feels so dumb, but I took a couple classes in C++. And I was like, this isn't very hard. I don't need to major in this. Um, and I mean, I didn't. That wasn't. That's not. That's not me bragging. I just didn't know what I didn't know. Like I didn't. But I didn't really understand that I wanted to. I wanted to create programs, and a computer science is more than programming, obviously. And so I think it's just funny that I've come back to it in such a strong way later on when I just abandoned it and decided I was going to be an English major and a classical studies minor.
But I think the interesting thing that we're both learning that, that we're both seeing play out now is that people that have those two like poles, like those two, parts of the spectrum in terms of like the technology familiarity, but also like the humanities discipline, that people that can see things from those two points of view are doing pretty well right now because it feels familiar and like you could talk across those two different
Yeah.
ways of thinking.
I think it's more important to be able to communicate and have some strong problem solving skills than to have an advanced degree in computer science. It doesn't hurt, but we're not trying to do, programming theory here. We're trying to just make things, which is both simpler and a different challenge at the same time, I think. And maybe somebody listening to this is going to be like, oh, Sam, you don't even know what you're talking about. And that's probably a fair criticism. But, I've seen law students go from knowing nothing about code to being able to code at the end of the semester for 2 years running. And I think those are those skills you can pick up. And the skills that you can't are some of that cultural literacy, cultural awareness, understanding. The liberal arts piece of it, I think, is harder to just pick up. That comes along in different ways.
So now you got my curiosity working about going to law school, like because you majored in English. It was a tech kind of focused thing where you were clearly like the Cat 5 on the walls and all stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like how does the combination of those things take you to law school?
I was, I was surrounded by engineers and computer science majors, and I was the English major. At one point, my best friend Corey and I decided I'd sit in on one of his classes and he'd sit in on one of mine. And in his class, I sat down. The professor walks in, doesn't even look at the room, turns to face the board, starts lecturing and writing on the chalkboard. The end of the class, they set down their books, start talking and lecturing. The end of the class, put down the chalk, pick up their books, walk out the door. I don't think they looked at the class once. And, everybody's just taking notes furiously, no questions, just absorb the lecture. He comes to mine, and my teacher looks like Jesus. He walks in Birkenstocks. The room is, the chairs are all arranged in a circle, like a horseshoe. We're just talking. We're arguing about books. There are women in my class. Like half of the class was women. I don't think there was one in his class. He was just like, "This is school for you?" I was like, "That's school for you?" Anyway, yes. So how did I end up going to law school? I think I was assuming that I would be a teacher. And I took a couple of education classes and I was like, nope, don't think that's for me. which again turns out to be what I'm doing. So that's hilarious. But and then so I decided, well, if I'm not going to do that, I guess maybe I should try to make money. So it was either business school or law school, I figured, and law school sounded more interesting. So I took the LSAT, and I think I took the whatever business people take. Took both of those tests, and I did okay on them. And so I got into the University of Minnesota, and I really, it was sort of like, it sounded like a more interesting challenge, and I thought I would get rich. Hasn't happened because of the law degree anyway.
After law school, there's Lawyerist, but before Lawyerist, there's at least I think 4 years or so. Um, were you working at a firm, private practice? What were you working on then?
I guess necessary context here is I was in school when during 9/11 in 2001, and I was interviewing that day. That was on-campus interviews, and very soon after, and for years, the bottom fell out of the hiring market. And so I went to a good law school. I went to the University of Minnesota. It was a top 20, not a top 14 or whatever, arbitrary. But it was a good law school, and I felt like I could reasonably expect to get a job at a firm. And it just didn't, it started dawning on me that maybe that wasn't a great fit for me. But also, it just wasn't as much of an option. It was just harder to get those jobs after the economy kind of tanked in the wake of that. From like 2003 was a big dip, then 2008 was a big dip. And, like it just kind of keeps coming every 5-10 years, I guess. But so I went after school. I ended up getting a job with a solo practitioner, Clayton Tyler in Minnesota, who is a really great criminal defense lawyer who, like many criminal defense lawyers, dabbles in other things. And so I got a lot of real great hands-on experience there, and just had a good experience. And eventually I thought he wasn't paying me enough, so I asked him for more money, and he gave me an offer where I would eat a third of what I killed, or something, get a third of the business I brought in, kind of. And I thought that was not good enough for me, so I went to work for another lawyer in town, who was amazing to work for. He was another criminal defense lawyer. He paid me a little bit more, and but I learned so much about legal writing from him. He had really colorful clients. One day the leader of the local chapter of Hell's Angels walks in with two burly dudes with him and dumps a rusty coffee can full of bills on the counter. And he's like, "Here, give this to Barry." And what should I tell him it's for? He'll find out tomorrow. He was like indicted on RICO racketeering charges like the next day. There was a safe cracker in the Twin Cities who finally got caught when he looked up at a security camera. He wore the same jumpsuit to every job. I mean, that guy, he had the most colorful clients. He got spectacularly disbarred a few years later. But he was really fun to work with. I really enjoyed him. Not because of anything related. I didn't know what was going on. It didn't rub off or anything, but great experience. Worked for him for a year. Thought I deserved more money, and he made me a similar offer. And those were both good offers that I should have taken. But, I was full of my piss and vinegar and my sense of my own worth. And then 2008 happens, and then looking back, I was like, oh, that would have been fantastic. So I went to work for a medium-sized insurance defense firm in the Twin Cities. And turns out billing by the hour is not something I can do. It just does not suit me at all. And so after about a year and a half, I wasn't billing enough in the way that they wanted me to. I was getting a ton of work done, but I worked efficiently, so like the billable hour does not reward efficiency. And that's one of the reasons why I, at Lawyerist, I was so angry about the billable hour, because here I am, I'm doing good work, I'm doing more work, but I'm not billing. They wanted me to just default to billing a certain amount per every letter. Like, it took me 5 minutes. I'm not going to, they're like, well, this is what they expect. Well, I don't. So, it was the combination of that and just, it didn't work out. I had some bad feelings, but so I looked for jobs I didn't want for a while, and then I decided to start my own practice. And that's when I started suing debt collectors and defending people sued by debt collectors, which is kind of some of the work I did then is kind of a straight line to what I'm doing now, I guess. So.
How did lawyers come about? Because for the benefit of the audience, it started in around 2007, right?
Yeah, I think technically I'm trying to remember. I think technically I started it in like the blog that became Lawyerist in like late 2006 with me griping about Fastcase.
Okay.
And then Ed answering me because his company was tiny. But I think it was late 2006, or early 2007. Yeah.
So, this is before AI. This is before like the whole, even the cloud wave. Yeah, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, that came along a bit later. Yeah.
So how did this come together for you? Like, why focus on that?
You know, I'm the kind of person when somebody tells me to do something, I immediately look the other way first. Like if somebody says go that way, I'm like, well, what's wrong with that way? And so, every time I ask somebody for a sample retainer agreement, because I didn't have one for my clients, right? I need to start, they hand me this 10-page thing and I'm like, this is shit. I'm not using this. And it's probably a perfectly good one. I look at it, I'm like, I can't give this to my clients. They can't read this. They don't understand it. It's a novel. Like, why would I use this? It sucks. I bet I can get it down to 2 pages. And I did, with decent font sizes and adequate white space. And so but it was that way for everything. Use this software. Why? That software sucks. I don't like it. I want to figure out what better way to do it. And I don't advise just automatically not doing what people advise you to do. They probably know what they're talking about. But I do think it's important to question everything. And if you didn't learn that in law school, then you didn't do a very good job. Like that is kind of our job, is to be skeptical. And so I started wanting an outlet. Like I figured this thing out, and it doesn't seem to me that anybody else has figured it out. So I want to share it. And so I started writing about it on the blog that became Lawyerist, which I called Solo Small Tech to start with. And I started writing about it there just because I felt like I wanted to know if anybody else was thinking about the same problems. And I also just wanted to put it out there to share. I mean, like I still do that on my website when I learn something, and if I go Google something and I can't find the answer and then I come up with the answer, I'll just publish the answer in case somebody else wants to find it. And I guess that was the attitude I brought to it back then. And I've always been a writer, so I guess it just felt natural to write about it and publish it. And I was kind of intrigued by this whole new blogging thing. And so that's how Lawyerist started. And it turned out there were a few people who were interested. And I mean, by the time Aaron came to me and said, hey, let's make this a business, I mean, I think we probably had like 300 visitors a month, so which felt cool at the time, but now feels kind of quaint.
One of the things that you touched on right now, that kind of sharing ethos in a way, especially now with the stuff you're doing now, it's like open source, like it's free to use, just convincing people to use it. That thread I see throughout, what you've done. I mean, the way that I came to know you was I kind of crashed the party for the TBD Law conference, because it was.
That's where we met, right? I don't think we really knew each other before that, did we?
No. I mean, I didn't really know the community until then.
Mm-hmm.
And, I got invited along, and the thing for, the audience, TBD Law Conference, the To Be Determined Law Conference, right?
Also we just didn't know what to call it.
Yeah. But it was an amazing conference, and different than the ones that you experience now, because it was unstructured. It was people just talking to each other about stuff, and you guys provided like these helpful conversation starters about you getting groups together and talking and sharing. And
the whole concept was try to persuade about 50 really smart people to come to St. Louis and spend a couple of days in a room together, and don't put too much structure on it, and see what happens. And because the theory was we all have great ideas and we just don't spend it. We wanted to take the parts of people are like, oh, you should go to a conference for the networking, and you get to do it like waving at people on your way to unite. We're like, let's just do the in-between parts. Let's do an entire conference of the in-between parts. And that was essentially the genesis for law. And I mean, we partnered up with Matt Homan, who's brilliant and full of ideas, and it got a little bit more structure, but not much.
Yeah, that focus on the in-between parts where you feel the most from it. Like you feel like the most connection from those parts. And then, yeah, Matt with his really cool cartoons that he would.
Oh, and remember we sent everybody to the museum, that crazy museum in St. Louis with that I can't remember what it's called, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to it was Nicole Skippers who took me along
Yeah.
with her. But again, like tying back into the sharing ethos, it wasn't a small amount of time. You stayed with lawyer. You were running, at Lawyerist until 2020, like just before the pandemic, or
We agreed on terms for me to leave right before the pandemic hit, and then the pandemic hit, and we had Stephanie and Aaron and I were like, "Can we still do this?" And we decided to go ahead. And so yeah, I left. I left in 2020, right after the pandemic hit, and it was a funny time to leave because it felt like I was sneaking out the back door. Nobody really noticed that I'd left because the world had turned upside down anyway.
yeah, there's a method to that madness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And after that, like, I remember you were doing some, and maybe you still are doing some like WordPress development where you're creating like tools for
Yep.
lawyers to use.
I am still doing that on the side, just because I really enjoyed doing it. Um, and I get to work with I get to be picky since I have a day job. I get to be picky about my clients, and so I get to work with other do-gooders, hopefully. So
I know this is a real like general question, but if you think about the different projects that you've gotten to work on since Lawyerist, like in terms of um, helping people with um, legal services, access to justice, approaching the law, making sense of it. What's something that stands out for you? Like what is an experience from that you feel you really made a difference on so far?
I like to think that I've been trying to make a difference with all of the things I do, obviously, but building a website for a criminal defense lawyer is a different kind of. That's more like just providing a service. Whereas at Suffolk, well, at Lawyerist, we were trying to do something at scale. We were trying to help lawyers figure out how to run better practices and better serve clients and take advantage of technology at a small scale, but a bigger scale than just one-on-one coaching or something like that. And then at Suffolk, this is the biggest impact I think we can have. Like we are essentially building digital public infrastructure in partnership with courts and legal aid organizations. And so the work that I do is not the glamorous part of it, but it's the part that makes the glamorous part possible. We're having a conversation recently with somebody who in our community who volunteers with us, who was worried that we're not adapting to the current moment. We're not doing enough to adapt to the current moment. And I was, we've talked about our metaphor of roads and bridges. And one of the things that sparked in my brain was like, we were talking about it, is like, no, you're right. Like, we're not marching over the bridge. We're making sure there's a bridge for people to march over. Right. Like, I'm blanking on the bridge that MLK and the marched over in the South, but
Yeah, I can't remember right now myself.
yeah, but in a way, and now I'm going to be careful about how much credit I give, but the maintenance crews that kept that bridge up are some of the most important people in those pictures, but they're not in them. Who knows? They live in those towns. They may be a bunch of racists too, but they still are important, because if there's no infrastructure to march over, you don't get to have your mark. And I think that's the work that we're doing at Suffolk. We're making sure that there's a bridge for people to march over. You can't build a tool that allows people to file asylum claims efficiently and effectively from a cell phone at the border if the tools to build that don't exist. And we're making sure the tools exist and stay up and are connected to courts. So I think it's not the sexy, we're at home doing our homework, right? But I'd rather be Hermione than Harry, if I'm honest. And I think that's more the work that we do. And it affects a ton of people. And it's not the glamorous, sexy hero at the front, behind the podium, but we put up the bandstand and make sure it stays up.
100% organization and the ability to execute on ideas.
Yeah.
Critically important. It's the only thing that really keeps things going for the long term. One thing that comes to mind though with all of the different things that you've been working on throughout your career is just me like wanting to ask you why. You've done a lot that focuses on doing good for people. Like one route may have been go to law school, focus on making a ton of money. Um, Regardless, you could have that could have been your North Star, right?
Mhm.
Why was it to help people?
I mean, well, there's like the selfish reason why I do what I do, and then there's that, which I have tried to help. Mostly, the selfish reason is it's interesting work, and I don't want. It has never felt good to me to just make something and then charge a ton of money for it. I don't like doing that. I want to. I think knowledge should be shared. I think learning should be shared. I don't know. My mom always made me volunteer, I guess, and maybe that just stuck. But I think it's more fun to be like, hey, look at this cool thing I did. You could probably do it too, or I can help you. That feels much better than look at this cool thing I did. You can't have it unless you pay me a ton of money. That feels gross to me. And I realize that's very uncapitalist of me, I suppose, but I don't know. I don't like that. So, and helping people feels good. I guess maybe that makes that selfish too, but I think helping people feels good. I don't think it's actually any more complicated than that. I just like doing it and it makes me feel good. And so I do that. And for as long as I can make a decent living doing things that make me feel good, I would rather focus on that. But I also just think like genuine, like there's been icky times where somebody has like stolen our ideas in a way that made it feel gross.
Mm.
And that sucks. It feels shit. But I'd rather keep on being open and honest and generous because my belief is that that is the right way. I think good guys do win, and I think it comes back to you. And every time I have given things away, it has come back to me. I've been okay. Like I'm doing okay. And I've been giving things away from the very beginning. Like the reason I'm at Suffolk has a lot to do with the fact that when I started my practice, I was pissed off that Minnesota has goofy service rules that are not worth going into. But the gist of it is you don't have to file a lawsuit in order to start one. And because of that, people would get served with a summons and complaint. They would call the court and the court would say, we don't have a file for you. And they would go, okay. And then they would be defaulted. And then the debt collectors would start suing them. And so I started writing about that on a blog. And I created a free answer and affidavit of service and discovery request package. And I gave it away. And part of that is selfish. You can't defend people who haven't answered their lawsuits. But part of it is just like, people are getting screwed and this sucks. And if I just genuinely give it away, I'm not asking for email addresses. I'm not even asking you that. There's no price. Just click here, you download the thing, and it'll tell you how to use it. Every time I've given stuff away, it comes back to me. And that was easy. People came back because they wanted help. But it happens again and again. That's why I believe in open source. I think we're stronger when we do it all together. Most of the things on the internet wouldn't exist if it weren't for open source. So let's just keep that ball rolling. And I don't know. I guess I'd have different feelings about it if I built something great and then somebody stole it and made millions of dollars off of it. But I'm not doing anything that important. So,
Well, I beg to differ on that. I think
I'm not doing anything that you could steal from me and sell for millions of dollars. I don't think.
And let me ask you a couple questions I ask all my guests.
Oh God, you told me what these were going to be, and I just forgot about it. ADHD.
Well, I'll remind you. I know you have some answers because you've already been dabbling in it behind you.
Okay.
But the first one is, like a lot of the people that I interview, including yourself, like there's a lot of irons in the fire. There's a lot of stuff that you're working on, and varied interests. And for the benefit of the audience, like, do you have any, insights or tricks or tips about a work-life balance? Like, how do you pull it off where you do so many things, but you don't let it drive you too hard and you get to still stay, a relatively sane human being?
That's a good question. And the icing on the cake is I also have ADHD. So there's always other things I want to be paying attention to. And if I'm not careful, there's that constant feeling of there's something I should be doing. And so that makes it even harder to check out from work, to give yourself time to check out from work. This was really hard too at Lawyerist because I was working at home just like I do now, but I was working at home for my own business. So I could always justify doing more. Um, and it's easier now when I believe them when they tell me I'm only supposed to work until 5 o'clock. So then I can set it aside. But when you're working for yourself, I think it's more challenging. I think the answer is just routines and forcing yourself to set things aside. And like I work in my office in the basement of my house most of the time. And at 4 o'clock, I'm on Boston time. So at 4 o'clock Central Time, I walk away from my computer and I go upstairs. I don't have a longer commute than that. It's just a stairway, but I leave the office and I try to leave and I try to be well organized enough that it's easy for me to I'm not holding a bunch of stuff in my brain that I have to do, so I'm able to walk away. I say that it sounds simple. It took me years to develop this skill, especially, but I learned it while I was at Lawyerist to just walk away. And I think it's hard to do, but right now I work with great people who understand that we have the time that we have to get the work done, and there are some things that require everybody all hands on deck and work late, but if that isn't rare, exceptionally rare, then we've just scoped things wrong.
Yeah.
And I think at Lawyerist, we had started getting really good at scoping. What is the job that we can do with the time that we have? Because it's not fair of us to ask more than 40 hours a week. People were paying 40 hours a week to work. And so if it's going to take longer than that, then the project needs to be a smaller project or needs to be a longer project, because we have to scope it to the resources we have, not just assume everybody's going to work their tails off 80 hours a week. And when you do that and you really mean it, eventually it sinks into your thick skull, in my case. And that's what work-life balance looks like for me, is truly just being able to step away at the end of the day. And then I guess this is a new thing for me, but like this, we talked about how this last week I screwed off to the wilderness for 6 days because I actually was starting to feel kind of burned out. Like I had enough things on my plate. And I have 2 daughters and they're both in soccer. And it's like every night I'm driving a half an hour to and from places. And it was just getting to be a lot. And I really needed to just run off to the woods. And I guess sometimes that's what vacation's for. Sometimes you just need to get out. I can't sit on a beach. That doesn't work for me, but I can sit on this beach because it's in the middle of nowhere. But this is what I've realized this is what recharges me, is getting fully away from things. But if you're a beach person or staycation works for you, do that. But I think everybody just needs those periodically too.
It's great advice. Some that I should follow.
It's really hard to do when you're an entrepreneur and you have your own business, because it's so much harder to let go. While we were lawyers, that was like a concerted effort that we made. Was one of the reasons we were doing all of the work on the business was because Aaron and I wanted to be able to go on vacation, and then Stephanie, we wanted to be able to go on vacations. We felt like we deserved that. And so over the last few years there, we had gotten to the point where all of us could just check out and go on vacation. It's hard work, and we had to do it very deliberately. So,
which leads me to the last question. It's related. It's like, after you're doing all of this work and also taking the time to keep balanced, what makes it all worthwhile for you? Like when you put all of this together, what is that for you?
I honestly don't think it's any single reward thing. I just enjoy the work I do a lot. Actually, I find the work itself rewarding. I need breaks from it. It's work, but I think I just enjoy that. And then every once in a while, you launch something and you check your stats and you realize, I think in the last month, 900 people have sealed their eviction record in Massachusetts using a tool that the students and Quentin and David and Bryce and I built together. And you're going, this was Aaron Street at Lawyerist. I'm bad at this. I'm bad at taking the time to stop and pat myself on the back. And I think you have to do that. And that's what makes it so that the day-to-day work can be its own reward, is occasionally stopping and recognizing that you just kicked ass and you did a really cool thing and congratulating yourself for it.
That's awesome. Yes, we all need to take the time to let it sink in and enjoy it. Enjoy the moment.
If you can't do it yourself, find somebody who can do it for you. I have a friend recently who is terrified of public speaking, and one of the things that made me realize is she's never had the experience of being introduced by someone else. You have been. And how awesome do you sound when other people tell an audience why they think you're cool enough to be on that stage, right? It feels great. And even if you don't get anything with that, it's pretty rewarding to hear why other people think you're great enough to be on a stage. And so I'm going to write how I would introduce her.
Yeah, you introduce her.
Yeah, I'm gonna, because I love that idea. But that's the kind of pats on the back you get too. I like that idea. Maybe we should do that for our colleagues once in a while as a form of recognition.
Sam, I want to personally thank you for the work that you've been doing.
Yeah,
no, seriously, like you have been a personal inspiration to me. Like I wouldn't be as involved as I am in the community without that introduction to it by you.
Well, thanks back, I guess. It's been really rewarding to see the amazing work that you've been doing over the last, I don't remember when TBD law was at this point, but let's say a decade.
Yeah. Well, for everyone in the audience who wants to learn more about what you're doing, keep in touch, how can they do that?
samglover.net is my personal website. And if I'm doing anything interesting, it'll probably start there.
Perfect. Sam, again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Anytime, Tom. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too. And for all of you out there, thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.